What's up, fine folks? Welcome back. This is episode 11 of Double Tapped. I'm Jay.
I'm Tanner.
Tanner, we're bending the rules again. But we just had Mexican food.
That's true. We make the rules.
It's very hot outside.
It is. It's really warm.
So really there's nothing better for those two things put together than a margarita. And this is definitely the best prepackaged margarita
Cayman
on
Jack.
the shelves.
Shout out to the Caymans. They're
Delightful.
Great. I've never seen this quote on the side of the can. Quote, this is in quotation marks, arguably the most refreshing margarita in the world. End quote.
That's a pretty hefty argument to make.
I don't know if in the world
most
applies,
refreshing canned margarita? Now you're talking.
Yeah, this is the ultimate summer drink.
Yeah, for sure. Tanner, it sounded a little dangerous there for a second. Oh,
We're good.
What you been playing this past week?
I've been playing a game that we are going to talk about a little bit later, and a game that we've talked about a lot already in Returnal. But that's going to be a big topic for later, so we're not gonna broach it now. I've just kind of been dabbling. Yeah. It's been one of those weeks.
Dabble.
I've been playing a little bit more NBA 2K. Still very high on that game. Great podcast game. I was looking at. We recently saw our good friend Andrew. He and I, before you got here, were just talking about like our rarest trophies. So I found out what his rarest trophies were.
Okay, what was it? Do you know?
His top 3 rarest trophies were from Killzone Shadowfall.
Of course.
Which did not surprise me.
We are a unique group when it comes to that game.
Also, UFC, which did not surprise me at all. But 2 of the most surprising ones were from Don't Starve.
Oh.
Which are trophies that I got him. Because we were I forget why, but I started playing it on his account.
Yeah.
And just ended up with like the perfect map.
That's awesome.
And so there's this thing in Don't Starve on the PlayStation where it's like one of the trophies is specifically called Build the Accomplish Shrine, which is just a silly cosmetic thing just made for a trophy. But you need like specific parts to get it. So I got this trophy for him, and then there's another trophy for like using it, which is just clicking it 725 times. I don't know why that's the number. He has both of those trophies that I got him. I do not.
There you go.
Because the map just worked out for him in such a way. So
the game is very luck based in a lot of ways.
So I have been dabbling now in Don't Starve. Been kind of playing that game a little bit more. It's a great game.
I have like a lot of nostalgia towards that game in a way that is probably not warranted because I was never particularly good at it. But something about the aesthetic, the Minecraft survivalist nature of it, like I have a undying respect for that game. That game is really amazing.
It's so good. So I've been dabbling in that. I have downloaded but yet to play at all Persona 5 again. Okay. It's a game I've had on the back of my brain for a while. Fun stream game, but I think it would serve me better as a off-stream sort of podcast game because it is, very grindy. It's a JRPG. I've also downloaded Tricky Towers again, as per our conversation a couple of weeks ago. There's some other games that I downloaded Sonic Mania. I've never really played a Sonic game. Reading Console Wars, a lot of it's about Sonic, so I was like, I have this for free. It was a Plus game forever ago. Yeah. Another Plus game, Wreckfest.
I downloaded Wreckfest.
Okay. Have you played any of it?
Not yet.
So I played it. Wreckfest, for those of you who don't know, is a racing kind of game, but it's equally about racing and also destroying your opponents in sort of like a monster truck setting, or that kind of thing where it's like a what do they call those? Destruction Derby? Is that what it's called? Yeah. So it's like one of those things.
But not Destruction All-Stars because
that's true. That game was not good.
No,
but
it was meh.
I had Wreckfest a long time ago. The first time I ever heard of this game was like, no joke, probably 7 years ago. Someone that I Nerd Cubed, who was like a YouTuber, I really liked him at the time, and he did their sort of. It was very, very early access. It was like a sandbox. So it was basically the same destruction engine, but there were ramps you could go off, but you're by yourself, and then there were like bowling pins you could drive into. It was just like a little sandbox. So I've had this game on PC for years, but haven't really gone back to it after the sort of fun that gave me. Yeah. There's a lot more game to that game than there used to be.
I'm excited to dive into it.
Yeah, I'm interested to see more. I haven't really played enough to give it a full thought, but it's free right now. So if you have a PlayStation, download it.
That's about it.
Yeah.
Pretty much all I've been playing is Returnal. And as I touched on last week when I was, I had just overcome the hours-long search for Scout Log 9.
Yes, which I don't have, by the way, and it scares me.
I'm currently on the hours-long search for Xenoglyph Cipher 20.
Which means nothing to people who haven't played that
game. And we're going to talk some more about the structure and story and a lot of things that Tanner hadn't got to talk a lot in depth about.
Yeah.
We're going to get into a lot of that later.
Yes.
That'll give me an opportunity to sort of describe in more detail why I maybe don't have this one yet.
Okay.
So we'll get more into that later.
Yeah.
But for now, Tanner, this is the biggest news week we have had so far on this show.
Yeah, so we should be clear. We normally record on either Saturdays or Sundays. For a number of reasons, Jay is out of the town for the weekend. And there's just a lot of news happening today.
Yeah.
We're recording on Thursday, May 28th. So, is it 28th?
27th.
27th, May 27th. So, that's when we're recording. I'm sure there's stuff that's going to happen between now and you seeing this, but just giving that.
And we've also made it aware that we will not be recording an episode next week.
Right.
Although, wouldn't be surprised. Just check our Twitter accounts. I'm sure they'll have some reactions if anything crazy happens.
Yeah.
And we will definitely touch on all of that at a later point.
Sure.
But for now, here's the stuff that we have on tap that we can talk about.
Hey.
First of all, let's hit with some of the quick stuff because we've got some big game, presentations that have happened today. But there are a few little news stories we wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
At least for a very brief moment.
Sure.
The first one, Uncharted 4 reportedly coming to PC.
Yes.
Cool.
I'm all for it. Will be interesting to see if this is sort of a smoke signal for a possible Uncharted 5.
Yeah.
Because I wonder what the benefit of bringing it to PC, because the games we've seen them bring to PC so far, Horizon getting a sequel, Days Gone, which we thought might get a sequel, apparently that's not happening. Death Stranding was brought to PC. People think that might have just been more of a Kojima thing than a Sony thing, but all of the Heavy Rain, Beyond Two Souls, Detroit Become Human, all those came to PC. But it seems like if people are trying to read the tea leaves of this announcement, there may be another Uncharted game somewhere in the works. I would not doubt a new Uncharted game at some point.
Yeah, at some point.
I just don't think it'll be Naughty Dog, and I don't think it'll be soon.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I think this seems to be Sony's strategy, which is just to sort of dangle the carrot in front of people in different platforms and say, hey, get a taste of this franchise that we're going to unveil a game for later,
right?
And then come get our console so you can play it.
Yeah.
They did it with Horizon. I think they're pretty clearly doing it here as well.
Yes.
But good for people who haven't gotten the chance to play Uncharted 4 because it's an absolutely wonderful game.
And I'm sure that game will run magnificently on PC hardware.
I'm excited to replay it at some point on PS5.
Yes.
I'm sure I had last played it on PS4 Pro, which I imagine that game came out in 2016.
Yeah.
You probably got about as much as you could get out of it on the Pro.
Right.
But still, the game still looks fantastic.
Yeah, I wonder if at some point, because has Uncharted 4 gotten like an FPS boost yet on PS5?
I want to say it actually was already running at 60 on the Pro. So
I wonder if we'll get the 4K 60 thing then, because I imagine some of the work of putting it on PC would be giving it some of the variable refresh rates and resolutions and stuff. So would seem like a no-brainer to bring that to PS5. So that'd be a good sign
Definitely.
as well.
And this story emerged sort of in the wake of a Sony sort of internal sort of presentation that was sort of circulating on Twitter. This wasn't like a public presentation of any kind.
Yeah, it looked like it might have been to shareholders or one of those kind of things.
And another interesting tidbit that came out of this that you had highlighted that you wanted to talk about at least a little bit was the growth in, I guess, gender share of PlayStation console ownership over time.
Right.
Because there was a graphic that was tweeted.
Yes.
That was basically PS1 to PS4/5. And the percentage jumped from, I want to say, 18% to 41.
41, I think. Yeah.
41%.
So, this is of people who identify as women owning consoles, which I just want to bring it up because I think it's awesome. And it's one of those things that obviously you see a lot of. The vocal minority of gaming seems to be, the man mad about whatever game, right? Yeah. That seems to be like when you picture
that's pretty much the vocal minority about anything.
That's true. That's very true. But it's really cool to see not only on just in gaming in general, the sort of realization of companies that, women play games too, because a lot of our generation, it didn't matter. We grew up playing games. It didn't matter who you were. And now those people are adults buying consoles. That I think is a big part of it. But also it's cool to see that it's PlayStation, which is a lot more all-encompassing, because the last visuals that we saw for something like this, or at least that I remember, was for the Nintendo DS. And they were saying like our market share is almost 50-50, that kind of thing. But Nintendo has done a much better job skewing to all markets, I think, than Sony
Families.
has. Right, exactly.
Not just people.
Yeah, so the fact that this is a statement for Sony, and I have the pleasure of knowing so many like women streamers and female gamers in the community, all that kind of stuff, and the amount of people who love sort of your Naughty Dog, your God of Wars, like those kind of games is a huge portion. Yeah. Almost every female gamer I know that's played, almost every gamer I should say, that have played those games have loved them, and it's cool to finally see data backing that up.
Yeah, and I think you can give PlayStation a decent amount of credit for actually leaning into female protagonist-led games with the likes of Ellie and Aloy and Lost Legacy featuring Chloe as a spinoff of Uncharted.
Celine and Returnal.
Celine, absolutely, which we'll talk about.
Yeah.
They've done a great job in that front.
They have, and I saw some people talking about it too. It's like, it's so nice we've moved on from sort of the bro 90s aesthetic and advertising when it comes to video games, and it's just become whoever wants to play can play.
Yeah, and it's sort of interesting, a little bit of my personal perspective being, and I've always approached media this way, of being like, I'm very, Breaking Bad is an example that I bring up in this context a lot. You root against Walter White, right? But I've always been like, I identify with whoever the protagonist is.
Right.
So I sort of root for Walter White.
Yeah.
I always thought that maybe it would be tougher for me to sort of transition to, games led by a female protagonist.
Yeah.
It has not been.
No, it's not at all.
It's all about it. You come to realize as you get older that if this is a character that's well developed, it doesn't matter who they are, like where they come from.
Exactly.
You're learning their story, and it's just, if it's told well, it's told well, and that's all that really matters. And kudos to them. They've told a lot of female-led stories really well.
Agreed. And I think this this is just a broader point in gaming in general. An easy point to this being not necessarily from man to women, but from white man to black man in Watch Dogs, right? Aiden, the white guy, was the most boring character of all time. Then Marcus, the black guy, as the protagonist of Watch Dogs 2, was so awesome and so fun and way more relatable than Aiden ever was, even though I, on paper, share more from an identity standpoint with Aiden. So it just, like you said, it comes down to the story you're telling and not the character who's the main point of it.
Yeah, so good trends to see on that front.
Agreed.
And we had actually talked about an interesting hypothetical that I'm using very loosely to transition into our next story.
Oh, okay.
Talking about that we thought that maybe even the Switch, because we were talking about Nintendo consoles, might be even more interesting to see there closer, we guessed, closer to like a 50-50 skew.
Right.
Speaking of the Switch.
Whoa.
There have been more reports that have come out today, further, not solidifying, because it is not solidified,
right,
but further hinting towards the potential of a 4K capable Switch due out as early as this fall.
Which would be good for my E3 prediction.
Would be great for yours, but as early as leaves the window open for mine.
Yeah, so, absolutely.
We'll never know until we know.
What do you want it to be called?
I don't want it to be anything weird. I want it to be like the Switch Plus or the Switch Pro.
What about the Super Switch?
I kind of like that.
Super Nintendo, a little bit of that.
I don't hate
history.
That. And I do think that gives it a little more of the feeling of a leap in a way that the others don't.
Yeah.
Like the PS4 Pro doesn't have the same ring to it because it's still the PS4 something.
Yeah.
Something that would sort of differentiate it in a way that, I don't know. It's hard to say because is that really any... different than Switch Pro, Switch whatever.
No,
not
but
really,
it's cool.
But it's cool.
And
the word super.
That's a big thing in marketing. It's just the cool factor.
It absolutely is. So we'll have more on that whenever we get an official announcement, which has to be very soon.
Yes.
Tanner,
what's up?
I told you not to look at Twitter before we get on.
Yeah, this was really soon. Literally
this was
30
15 minutes ago is when this story dropped, or at least when I saw it. So this is the last of these quick hitter stories I want to talk about.
Okay.
Tanner, do you know who Merle Dandridge is?
I don't.
But you do. Merle Dandridge is reprising her role as Marlene in the HBO Last of Us series.
Oh, that's awesome.
I'm like, that is awesome. I love that.
Yeah, that's so dope.
Because we know Pedro Pascal is going to be Joel. I forget the name of the girl who's going to be Ellie.
I do too.
But she's from Game of Thrones, right? So her.
Yes, yes, but it's not Macy Williams.
I was not familiar with her prior to her casting in this.
No.
But it was interesting to see them go that route with those characters and then actually cast the voice actor of Marlene as Marlene.
That's going to be such a great, almost a wink and a nod to the fans of the game in a way. But it's, the more that I think, like I'm just processing this now, she may be one of the hardest characters to not think of the exact way she looks. Like Marlene, to me, I picture her when you meet her early on in Last of Us 1 and she's injured, and it's like her facial expressions there. It's going to be so exciting to see her be able to bring that to the show.
Yeah.
And I wonder how much of a role she'll play. I hope it's the same role as the game.
I think this bodes well for how accurate the show will be to the story of the game.
Solid point.
You know?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Like, why else would they cast someone like this if not that Marlene is going to have those integral scenes the same way she has in the game?
Right.
She's not throughout the whole game, but some of the scenes she has are among the most impactful in the whole game.
Oh, agreed.
That I can just picture her knocking that out of the park if they let them do it in a way that honors those scenes in the game.
And I'm more optimistic. I mean, I've always been semi-optimistic for the show just because it's HBO.
Oh, me too.
But hearing Andrew sing the praises so heavily of Chernobyl, which is the same showrunner, director as The Last of Us show, that has me even more excited with this news. So, man, I hope it's good.
I have no doubt that it'll be good. It's just how good.
Yeah.
We shall see. Tanner, let's move on to our 3 big stories.
Yeah.
In ascending order of bigness.
Okay.
And that's ascending order of bigness for amongst us hardcore people. Because amongst the most casual, we might be going in reverse order of bigness. Not really.
That's fair, yeah.
But the first one being Sonic. A new mainline Sonic game has been announced.
Okay.
It's due out in 2022. We don't pretty much know anything else.
Okay, we don't know a name?
We don't know a name.
All right.
Other than all we know is it's from Sonic Team, the team that's made all the mainline Sonic games.
Yes.
We do know that they are remastering Sonic Colors, which is a game that I'm not really familiar with.
Wasn't that a DS game?
I think it was some sort of spin-off that on some other platform that I'm not really familiar with. Me being, I'm not going to call myself a Sonic fan, but I'm a Sonic appreciator.
Sure.
A Sonic nostalgia indulger, if you will.
It was on DS and Wii.
Okay, so yeah, they're remastering it, which is cool. You know,
that's
apparently
fine.
it's actually one of the more well-regarded Sonic games, especially in recent years.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So good to get Sonic back in the public eye, especially putting one of his better outings forth. Are you at all intrigued by the idea of a new, full-on Sonic game?
Yes.
Really?
The only reason being console wars.
Oh, okay.
This book is so much about Sonic versus Mario that I have come to, and the way I mentioned this last week that I've been reading Console Wars. I'm about halfway through it now. I've been reading it really fast for me. It's like a 600-page book, but it almost paints Sega as the good guy and therefore Sonic as sort of the hero of the good guys. And it's been effective in marketing Sonic to me. So much so that I downloaded Sonic Mania, as I mentioned earlier. But I am so into this book that I might be into this game. We'll see. Well,
to me, it's always, and this is always where I've come down. If you strip away the history of the two franchises, conceptually, Sonic is a cooler character than Mario.
Oh, yeah.
You know? Well, there is a coolness to Sonic that Mario doesn't have.
Sure, and that was the whole idea. And not to nerd out about Console Wars too much, but it's just relevant right now. With the Sonic versus Mario thing, when the Genesis was really making its push, they did the Sega World Tour, which was basically kind of like what we did with PlayStation VR at Best Buy, right? It was kiosks at different malls. But it was a lot more elaborate, and they would literally put an SNES with Super Mario World and a Genesis with whatever Sonic, I guess just Sonic the Hedgehog, side by side, and 88% of people chose Sonic because he was faster, he was cooler.
I was going to say, in a limited slice, you could see how oh, look how much faster and more dynamic this game is compared.
Look how fluid the gameplay is. Yeah. So he has a cool factor, and we are both a little bit too young to really have experienced not the game Sonic Mania, but the phenomenon of Sonic Mania.
2D Sonic in its prime.
Yeah, early 90s. Sonic was apparently huge. Yeah. To a level that I didn't fully comprehend until reading this book.
Yeah. I remember watching some Sonic cartoons as a kid and thinking that was cool. And obviously, Sonic Adventure 1 and 2 are where my primary Sonic allegiances lie. Yeah. And that sort of leads me to, I don't know what I want this game to be. I don't know if I want what is a de facto Sonic Adventure 3, where it's more stage based and that sort of thing, or if I want something that's more like the Mario Odyssey of Sonic, where it's a little more open and you can do more things.
I mean, if they craft something that good, I'll be in.
And I mean, that's just more of like an analog to say what the game could be based
format,
on, less in terms of the quality of what I think it's going to be.
Yeah.
But if they give us like an 8 of that style of Sonic, I am all in. Like all in.
It's funny because I have no nostalgia for that franchise at all. And I was talking, I don't remember if it was on the podcast or on stream, but like, I don't even know if I've ever held a Sega controller.
Oh.
Like it's that, I have no connection to Sega whatsoever. Was it any SNES family, then N64, then PS1, and then just took off from there. But I am rooting so hard for Sonic now because of this damn book that I'm like, all right, I'll play it. Why not?
I mean, there's no way it's ever going to turn the corner like an Overcome Mario.
No.
Here's just hoping they make something good. That's really all I could hope for.
That fan base is so diehard too that like I'm
to a fault.
Sure, as many gaming fan bases are.
Sure. All right, let's move on to our next story.
Okay.
And we're going to talk a little bit about Dying Light 2.
Yeah.
Dying Light 2 Stay Human.
Oh.
As it is now known.
That is the subtitle.
Tanner, just earlier we watched the gameplay reveal that came out today.
Yes.
Technically it's kind of like a gameplay re-reveal. We had seen some gameplay 2 years ago.
Which I was surprised it was that long ago.
Yeah,
it feels way more recent.
But what are you thinking? I'm like, as I said, I'm actually more excited about this game than the game that we're going to talk about here in just a minute.
Right. I played, and it's been one of those games that when I have the time I want to get to, and maybe now is the time. Dying Light 1 I've probably played 4 or 5 hours of. Like
That's all, really?
Yeah, I didn't play that much.
Wow.
Maybe a little more, but really not a lot at all. I'm to the point where if I were to pick it up now, I just restart it.
Yeah.
But it has a lot of promise to me, even in the early stages of like, okay, this is legit scary when it becomes night. All the resources you can find are cool. The parkour's fun. And this seems like really cool evolutions of that. Looks great. Visually looks really, really good. The combat, at least in this gameplay trailer, this vertical slice, looks very brutal. To a point. I don't remember the first one being that way, but maybe I just didn't play enough of it.
It wasn't quite as that. As
like you could literally just curb stomp someone in the trailer, and that was pretty fun. I'm intrigued by it, and I want to play Dying Light 1 before this comes out on, as it was revealed, December 7th this year.
And this is one of the few times that I would ever say, a lot of people sort of have complaints when a sequel to a game comes out, and they'll just say, oh, it's more this.
Right, more of the same.
Like they're expecting some sort of evolution.
Yeah.
This is one of the few games that's ever came out where all I want is more of that first game, just in a little bit of like, a little prettier. Like, I just want the same game sort of revamped in a little bit. Because this is going to be some very high praise. Because I've talked about how much I love the foreboding atmosphere of Bloodborne.
Yes.
I think that the dynamic of switching from day to night in Dying Light evokes those same like high stress, but like, the visceral emotions that sort of Bloodborne conveys to me.
Yeah.
And it's just that first game, like, I don't care about the story. I don't care about the characters.
Right.
I use that to get from point A to point B. I care about the moment-to-moment gameplay and how that actually impacts me emotionally in a weird way. It's not just the whacking zombies left and right. It is. You can like. I don't think there's not a clock in or a watch that you can look at in the game saying it's 5 o'clock. The sun is going down.
Yes.
If I don't get back to the base right now, I'm going to get stuck out here, and then it's not game over, but it's game turned way up.
Right. It's almost in a weird way evocative of Don't Starve.
Yeah,
it's the same sort of mechanic where it's like,
sure, absolutely.
I can see the sun setting. Holy shit! I gotta get back to my camp.
That's a great point. That's odd that those two games came up both in this podcast.
Yeah, that's so interesting. But I that makes me want to pick this game up again even more, especially seeing this trailer, seeing how promising it looks, seeing how fun it looks. Like it looks like it prioritizes sort of the silliness, and in a zombie killing game, that's pretty good.
Talking about like your insane parkour skills or what's propelling you through the open world.
Yeah.
Like,
the voiceover guy.
Yeah. And our good friend Skinny is maybe the biggest Dying Light, stand.
He's been so hyped today
in the world. And I'm not too far behind him. Like Dying Light 1 is, I don't want to say it's criminally underrated. It was a well-received game, but like it's just one of those games that sticks out to me as a game that maybe it's because that first trailer for it years and years ago, I want to say that was in like 2014 or 2015, was so awesome and just conveyed like that sense of going into next gen, because that was early PS4 era that enticed me so much and then paid off as being really great,
right?
That I'm really just looking to recapture that same feeling.
Yeah.
And I'm really hoping this game delivers.
It looks good.
And I will say, I was going to make this joke. I'm just telling you it's a joke now. Because it comes out on December 7th.
Sure.
And if it gets delayed, that will be a day that will live in infamy.
Hey.
Shout out to FDR.
Big ups.
Tanner, our last story.
Yes.
We also watched the 20-minute long state of play entirely dedicated to Horizon Forbidden West.
Yes.
We still don't know when it's coming out.
Still no date.
But we do know it looks pretty incredible.
The visuals of this, and we were sort of in the best case scenario watching it on the new TV, look legitimately impressive. There was a point where I non-ironically said the power of the PS5 because in this gameplay demo, so it's a longer demo than I was expecting. You could argue maybe too long of a demo.
Sure.
It was like 14 minutes straight gameplay. There was no cutting. There was no like, oh, and then in this section you do this. It was like a 14-minute. This was as vertical slice as you can get. Just like cut it out of the game entirely and show it to us. I guess not too dissimilar to the way they showed off God of War at E3 that one time.
Maybe. But the thing about that is they had also done the same thing for Horizon twice.
Yes.
You know?
So we know what Horizon gameplay is like. This looks like an evolution of it. There's obviously a grappling hook. There's more verticality built into the world. There's a lot more emphasis on that verticality and on movement in general. There's a paraglider that's like the cybernetic paraglider that we both kind of popped for. It looks like they're making a lot of really cool improvements. I kept thinking throughout this gameplay trailer that Sony does a great job of not withholding some of the specialness of its franchises from other franchises. Because there were moments in this game that I was reminded both of The Last of Us, or in the trailer, of The Last of Us 2 with sort of the stealth moving through the bushes stuff, and also Ghost of Tsushima with the way the sort of the combat was playing and just the way they chose to film it and the setting. You can definitely feel that it fits in with those other two games and with the overall sort of action adventure pantheon that PlayStation is building. But my main takeaway so far is just the visuals. The visuals look incredible.
They do. And what I said to you earlier was my main hope for this game. It was obvious that technically it was going to be beyond impressive.
Yes.
My hope was that, things like the grappling hook and the glider and that sort of thing replace the sort of unnecessary, like dialogue options and certain things that made the first one feel less like just an open world action game and more like an RPG light.
Yes.
I'm like, I would be okay with them ripping out some of those elements wholesale and replacing them with more conveniences in the traversal and the gameplay and that sort of thing. That's what I'm rooting for, and that seems to be what they've indicated with what we just saw.
Yeah, with the cutscenes in particular, we mentioned that the cutscenes of Horizon, you and I both have sort of foggy memories of this game because it's been what? When did that game come out?
2016?
So it's been 5 years since
16
we
or
played
17.
I think it was the same year as Breath of the Wild.
It was 17 because Uncharted 4 was 2016.
Okay, so it's still 4 years from, and it was early 2017. Yeah. So you and I both remembered sort of the Bethesda style. Camera shoots one character, line. Camera shoots other character, line. Camera shoots one character, line. And it was very static.
Yeah, and very like rigid facial animations.
Yeah, it felt like playing Fallout or any of those Bethesda game cutscenes. And those aren't what you're... This is good for the thumbnail.
Exactly.
Those aren't what you're there for. And it seems like they open with sort of a dynamic cutscene. There are several points where you talk to a character. They seem to, at least to our eye, make this a point of like, hey, the cutscenes have gotten better. And even if it's just what they showed us of like character talks to character and there's a little bit of clever and it's more of just a straight up cutscene, that's all I need from this game.
Yeah, me too. I'm very interested in the new setting. They've teased, it was hard to tell exactly what they were teasing with sort of the storm that was coming in, but like the map that they pulled up that seemed to be pointing to a couple of other locations.
Yeah, I don't know what that was about.
I don't really anticipate them actually like uprooting you and taking you somewhere else.
Nor do I.
It seems like they've made this out to be you're pretty much exploring post-apocalyptic San Francisco for all intents and purposes, which is exciting too because the first one was great for its diversity in environments. You had your snow, you had your city, you had your desert, you had your forest.
Yeah,
but it would be cool to actually take full advantage of a city that is pretty well renowned and be able to explore it. Kind of like Spider-Man,
Sure.
You love exploring New York because it's New York.
Yeah.
This will be a cool take on that.
Well, and something I pointed out to you is that in the first game, at least to my memory, they weren't as overt in, oh, hey, this used to be the United States.
You had to dig to learn where you were.
Partially because that was the story, right? It was like it was kind of a Planet of the Apes moment of like, wait, we're on Earth? That kind of thing. With this one, in the trailer, it is way more overt. Like, you see a building that literally says diner on it. And
you see the Transamerica building, which they've shown like a couple times.
And you see like a trolley car and a bunch of just broken down, like what look like to be like Tesla cars or something like that. Like, it's obviously America and obviously the United States now, and obviously San Francisco. And so I look forward to seeing how, in a way, they sort of Last of Us-ize it, where they make all this stuff more built into the greenery of the world, but it's, hundreds of years removed. So.
Yeah. I will say that I have slight worries about the story, just because, and it's obviously it's kind of hard to say, but like, there were really cool plot elements to the first game that were like sort of your mind-bending moments. Oh, get it out. The mark hits him too hard.
I just went down the wrong pipe.
Yeah, that happens.
You're good. Go ahead.
But there's something about it that just makes me nervous. Like, they didn't really build a really compelling antagonist in the first game. It was all about the mystery of who is Aloy.
Yeah.
Where do these people come from? Who do they worship? Like,
where
do
am
these
I?
cults come from? Where am I? Where did the machines come from?
Right.
And with a lot of those revelations that have already happened in the first game, we're probably both going to have to brush up on the
I might
history
replay
of the first
it, honestly.
game. And I started it the other day, but I had sort of complaints about the lack of any good, not like a full-on port, capability per se, but it still was lacking in some ways. But I just really want to hope that they can reclaim that same plot twist, but maybe integrate it better with make other characters involved that make me more invested. Like, they brought out the one guy,
Erend.
Yeah,
I think that was his
from
name.
the Oseram, and I'm like, you could have died in the first game, and I probably wouldn't have remembered.
Yeah, exactly.
So
it's been so long, and for some reason, maybe it was the sort of boxy dialogue option thing, but that story has not stuck with me in a way that other games from before had. And I don't know what it is about Horizon specifically. But the gameplay looks really, really good. They in this version, similar to one of the E3 demos where you fight some boss that's like destroying a little town. You're fighting this elephant character. What was it called? Something Tusk. Yeah.
Tremor Tusk.
That's it. And they're kind of teasing that the new enemies can ride these creatures, and so 3 or 4 of them are atop of this big elephant thing, and the combat with that looked awesome.
Yeah, it did look really cool.
The way it was destroying the environment. That's when I jokingly said like the power of PS5. But it was, I mean, it had a hint of seriousness to it because it looks really, really promising in the same way the first one did, and I hope, like you said, that it can deliver in the elements we're not as sure about, because the gameplay is going to be great and the visuals are going to be great. I just hope the story lives up to that.
Yeah, and part of me is somewhat confident that they'll make it stick better this time, just because you have to. Okay, Horizon Zero Dawn being their first attempt at this whole new genre of game.
Sure.
They were getting their feet wet, learning how to make a game like this. They know now.
Yeah.
Now they can pour a little more of their effort into making sure the world is fully fleshed out with great characters and great story and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But all in all, obviously I'm excited for it.
Oh, super optimistic.
Beyond my little, sort of critiques of the first one, it's still a wonderful game. Yeah. And I'm very excited to play this one.
As am I.
Tanner, are you ready to move on to our big topic? I wasn't gonna. I started to ask. I started to do it, but I knew it might come.
It ruins the fun. Jay, it is time for our podcast within the podcast. This is crazy shit I saw on ResetEra, and it's gonna touch on a story we've already touched on.
Really?
So this was a post about the PlayStation. 41% of PS4, PS5 owners are now people who identify as women.
Kind of think this can't go well.
So this is from user Carpet Salesman, whose name is struck through because they were banned for this.
For this specifically, you assume?
Yeah, I assume, because it says in the post, user banned 2 weeks, exclusionary rhetoric.
Yeah.
They say, in reply to this post about 41% of gamers who own the PS4, PS5 identify as women. I can't believe that's true. I think more women playing would be a good thing, but I can't see the split being that high unless they're using some kind of weird definition to get to that figure. Like, quote, has access to and has played on a console wholly owned by someone in their household, end quote. As I said, I think it'd be a good thing. I just don't think we're there yet. Couple things.
There's some
here.
logical leaps that are being jumped through.
So their point, which is incredibly sexist, is that they play on, I assume their assumption is that they play on either their boyfriend or their brother or their husband's, some man in their family's PlayStation.
Yeah.
Which, A, that's not the case. And B, even if it were, that would just be a percentage of this.
Yeah.
Because the way they gather this information is just market research. They just poll a certain percentage and extrapolate it.
Yeah.
I got an email from Sony asking me, hey, you have a PS5. Can you give us some data about it? So I did like a 30-minute interview. It's just that writ large. There's another user named Lee Ravis, also banned.
Great.
Sounds a bit high to me. Maybe that percentage of women bought a console for one reason or another. Maybe for their spouse or kids. I personally only know 2 females. Love, by the way, you can always tell someone's agenda by using the word females. I personally only know 2 females who own and play a console and a ton of males. I wonder if that says more about you, Lee. Gaming boards are dominated by males and women, gaming boards are dominated by males, yet women love social media. Where are all these female gamers?
Okay. The most obvious retort of all time is they don't want to talk to you.
Exactly. First of all, I am not shocked that people have better things to do with their time than spend time on ResetEra.
Yeah.
Second of all, have you been on Twitch? Like, I know and am probably friends with maybe even more women streamers than men streamers. It's all just about like the circles you're in. And the fucking double standard here of, oh wait, women can't own PlayStations, but also when women are on Twitch, oh, they're just there to be titty streamers or whatever, and they're not actually into gaming. Well, it's like, here are evidence of women who are into gaming in both sides, and yet you're still coming up with these backwards avenues to say they aren't. It's just gatekeeping frustrates the hell out of me. I will say, I saw this post on ResetEra and I was like, all right, there's gonna be some people. 90% of the posts were like, this is awesome, love to see this. Like, most of ResetEra was really celebratory of this. This is just 2 people who are assholes.
This is when you, on Reddit, when you sort by controversial, this is what comes up.
Exactly, yeah.
And it's just funny to me for them to be like, Sony is telling me this.
They don't know.
I don't think that the sellers of this console, know what they're talking about.
Who would be inversely infected.
2 females. Yeah. And there are a lot more females than that,
The 2 I talk to play games, but
really.
I don't know more than 2, and I am the epicenter of video games. It's like, come on.
Yeah, that's just,
Internet gonna internet.
I'm glad that person is not my friend.
Yes, agreed. Yeah.
Nor could I draw a direct comparison from one of my friends to that person.
That person, yeah.
So, now, Tanner, shall we move on?
We shall.
To what I've dubbed the Returnal Dissection. Because we could talk about this as the discussion.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of things that are not exactly set in stone about this game.
Yeah.
And the way you said, we're going to talk a little bit, you have some things you want to talk about that aren't diving deep into the spoilers.
Right.
But we will get into some spoilers, but we will make it very clear when we're about to do that.
Sure, yeah. So the title of this is probably our final Returnal review and spoiler cast. At some point, we will give you as much of a warning as we can, saying from this point forward, we're going to spoil stuff. If you haven't beaten the game, don't listen. That is not yet. I want to touch on, because I finished the game this week, and I just want to touch on some of the things that should be celebrated about this game. I made a little list here.
Love to hear it.
First of all, just the overall gameplay
is just,
There are few games that I've played that, for a shooter, have felt this fluid and felt this good. I mean, Call of Duty always gets recognition, appropriately so, of how good their gameplay feels. This is in a different way feels as good.
Definitely.
Feels almost more like, obviously you can see Housemarque is incredibly impressive with this game to me, because before this they obviously made like Dead Nation, Alien Nation, Resogun. You can see that DNA when you play this game.
You really can.
There is a lot of Bulletstorm built into this, not Bulletstorm the game, but like Bullet Hell type stuff. Built into this game, and even as someone who loves Resogun, you can feel the projectiles of the Resogun enemies somehow moved into a 3D space. Yeah. It reminds me, in a very weird way, of the jump from Link to the Past to Ocarina of Time, where there's so many mechanics and rooms and enemy types that you go, oh, that's how they're doing this in 3D. They did this in Link to the Past. Because in a weird way, I think this is one of the more underrated things about Ocarina. It's almost a Link to the Past remaster. Like, it's not exact, but they borrow several mechanics from Link to the Past. And so I'm so glad I played Link to the Past before I played Ocarina, in the same way that I'm glad I played Resogun before I played this, because you can see that DNA of Housemarque. They didn't just come out of nowhere. Granted, they are doing things they've never done before with the way this game plays and looks and feels, but it's cool to just see that DNA built into it.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Going this far down is to say, like, it feels good, and this is a very nitpicky thing. And obviously, I've sung the praises of this game.
Sure.
One thing I never mentioned, I love how fast you run. Just movement without shooting feels really good. You move quickly. It doesn't feel sluggish at all. You get a very quickly, respawning dash mechanic. Like, you can dash constantly. You're jumping, you're grappling, all this sort of things. Movement, even without shooting, feels wonderful in this game. And that's something that, as a lover of, like, Spider-Man, and you can swing around New York all day and it feels great just because the traversal is done so well. This game does that for a third-person shooter maybe better than any other I've ever played.
Totally agreed. And it's really important to the setup of this game where, you're running. I assume if you're listening to this, you know at least a little bit about Returnal is, because we've talked about it a lot. And, the trailers are out there. But even just for the gameplay of, depending on how you want to play through levels, you might be running through the same biome over and over again to go to a side door, go back to the fabricator station or whatever. And I imagine that was deliberate, and like, people aren't going to want to spend time retracing their footsteps. Let's make them as fast as we can, and then that was built out into the gameplay as well. So that's really good.
Yeah.
Another thing I want to highlight is the music. It wasn't something, because I don't really remember the music from any other Housemarque games. I'm not sure if they brought in a new team, if it was the same people. I don't know, but this music is kind of central to the game in a way that I didn't expect.
Especially at one point, which
we'll talk about that later, but even just sort of I hate to compare all synth music to Stranger Things, but it does have sort of, Survive is the name of the group that made Stranger Things music. It has that sort of echoey, creepy
haunting
synth vibe going on in a really nice way. It blends so well with sort of the alien environment, the sort of high-tech meets low-tech atmosphere of the game. Obviously, the music is built into certain moments of the game, which we'll talk about again later. I always love when music is built in and integral to that. And then another comparison that I did not expect to Hades, where in Hades there is the music. Supergiant always loves building music into their game. And there are a couple of characters who, like Orpheus is in Hades, and he is like a musician.
Right.
And then there are a couple other musicians in the game. Just building that in and making that feel more part of that world, it feels amazing. And I think this music is one of those things that you may not notice when you play it, but then, well, you'll notice it at some points, but when you think about it, you're like, oh yeah, this soundtrack's dope.
Yeah, even outside of the big context that we were mentioning.
Yeah.
Just the entry into some of the other, and the bosses is when I notice it the most.
Sure, yeah.
And, dropping in and sort of the foreboding, like, crescendos of music that sort of accompany like the intro to a boss fight, and sort of it really encompasses the spirit of the game, where like it's been quiet, and then done, like bam, you're confronted with this enemy, especially if you've never fought him before and you're diving in for the first time, that really swells you and sort of hypes you up to like, all right, time to do this, and if I don't do this, I have a lot that I'm gonna have to do over again. So it really pumps you up.
And it's cool too, because a lot of this game is very cinematic. In that regard, it feels incredibly cinematic, right? Like you're going this boss fight and the music just swells and now it's like, oh shit, we have entered another level of intense. When this game, you could argue, is intense the full way through. Like every hit you feel in this game, you're like, fuck, I shouldn't have gotten hit there. Like every hit you take, you're like, damn it, I wish I had not gotten hit. Because they're, with exception to some things in the late game, pretty much everything is dodgeable.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, even there are things late game that are dodgeable, but not in the ways you're taught throughout the rest of the game. So every mistake you make, you feel for the entirety of the run, which is part of the great gameplay design. We might get into that later too. But another thing I just want to highlight, the boss design in this game.
Aesthetic design or actually the
gameplay
fight design. Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, the aesthetic design's great.
Sure.
And that's great for the whole game, but I was not expecting, granted, tough boss fights get compared to Souls games too often. That is a known. But I was not expecting this level of difficulty for the boss fights from this game. And the feeling of beating a boss in this game was euphoric.
Definitely.
Especially because they are so smart. This game is structured, it's a roguelite. You go through it technically in one shot, although that's not true. They structure it in such a way where you beat a boss, you don't have to beat him again. It's not like Hades where you beat 3 boss fights throughout every run. Now, granted, Hades is much shorter than Returnal, and you're just expecting that in each run. But the shortcut element of beating a boss fight really makes the time you beat it feel so important. And each boss design is really unique. Which I guess really unique's redundant, but each boss design is very unique, and granted, there are a smaller number of bosses, but they do a good job of making them all feel part of the same universe and sort of part of the same structure, but they're all very different in my mind.
Yeah, and that justifies the difficulty for beating them, not having to do it again. Like a game like Hades, I couldn't imagine 3 bosses you have to beat every time that are on the level of some of the bosses in Returnal difficulty wise. Like that's incredibly punishing. That would be, as someone who has very rarely ever ventured into like boss rush modes in any kind of game, that seems very daunting to me. So I agree with you that it's interesting for me because obviously this game is like a bullet hell made into a 3D format. Most of the bosses that I've ever encountered in sort of third person action games are melee based. It was very interesting and new to fight enemies that were so like projectile based. And it was a really cool thing to have to adapt to. And sort of the iframes that come along with dashes in the game, make you learn how you can dodge through and when you can attack and certain strategies. That it was a really cool new learning curve that I had to adapt to, but it was a blast.
And I think this game does about as good a job of, without getting too spoiler, we'll get to that later, about a good job as there are certain moments in games, they're very few and far between, but when you have insanely fun chaos, and I feel like that's the best moments of this game.
That's a great way to put it.
Where you're just in a boss fight and you're processing it, but especially to me on stream because I'm having to talk, and a lot of times in these boss fights, I would just be like, like I couldn't even make anything other than noises at the absolute chaos of these fights.
There's a point that I know to reference later now.
But there's so many projectiles on screen, but yet it never feels out of hand. Nothing ever feels insurmountable in this game. And that is another just credit to them and their gameplay design. Next up, something that I haven't seen celebrated as much, at least on like socials of this, the weapon variety. They do a great job of making... Go ahead.
Well, you go ahead and I'll make a point.
They do a great job of making multiple guns feel incredible in this game. So starting out, you have your pistol, and then you can pick up, I think in the first biome, you get like basically what amounts to an assault rifle, a shotgun. That might just be it. It might be those 3.
I don't remember that. And I think it's to a certain degree randomized when you get new weapons.
Because I found a gun, I think it was the Electropylon driver that you and I both love. Which is one of the most unique guns I've ever experienced in any game. Like I don't have a direct comparison to this gun.
No.
And it's fantastic. It's so good. But I found that, and I was streaming it, of course. Someone mentioned, I've beaten the game, and I just found that gun. I was like, oh, interesting. Okay, so
that would suck.
Yeah, it would suck because that's how I beat the final boss.
Effective.
But yeah, they do a great job. Granted, the shotgun not very viable in my opinion. I'm not a fan of the Spitmaw blaster, except maybe in the first biome. But
I think it is good against normal enemies, not bosses.
Sure,
that's my take for that.
But especially once you get to like the biomes that have more flying enemies, it's like, okay, you're too far away. But other than that, this game, because you can pick up several weapons in one run, it's not like Hades or some other roguelites where you're tied to one weapon the whole time. And so when you find a new gun, in most cases, if it's a level up or a damage up or whatever, you pick it up. Usually. Because you can adapt to the gun and take the benefits of the damage upgrade. Now, granted, if it's like one level and you're really liking the gun you have, you might stay with it. But I just thought the weapon variety in this feels great. There wasn't a time... Obviously, we could tier list the guns we like most, but, you know, if I had a level 15 gun and I saw a level 20 gun, I'm taking it, no matter what it is.
I will say that, we could tier list them, blah, 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 but I do think there is a pretty strong gradient between the good guns and the bad guns. There are a certain, I would say maybe 4 to 5 guns that I think are very viable, useful in almost any situation. Okay. And a couple that I just think are universally less useful. Okay. And we'll get into more of that when we get into sort of talking about more of it.
I want to see what yours are. The atmosphere of this game, in a similar way to, we talked about in Control, where the best character of that game is the oldest house, the building you're in. I wouldn't say the best character of this game is the planet, but it's definitely one of the best characters. Yeah. What's the planet called?
Atropos.
I thought it was Atropos. I couldn't remember. So... the world this exists in, I'm gonna go ahead and tie in the next one I have, which is the visuals as well. The way they've created with the music, with the sound design, which is incredible in this game, by the way, with the visuals, it's unlike any other game I've played. Obviously, it has reference to like Aliens. The movie is something people reference a lot. It has reference to other sci-fi franchises, but the sort of hybrid between... a lot of the enemies are somewhere on... you could kind of make a 3-circle Venn diagram of like hellspawn demons, aliens, robots. Yeah. And I would say most of the enemies in Returnal fall in one of those 3. But the way they build enemies out between those 3 is really fascinating. And the fact that they're like, in almost sort of a Destiny way, these sort of different races on the planet and the way they work together and oppose each other. There's a lot of work that went into just building the atmosphere. I would not be surprised if there's like a Bible of this game where it's like, you know, this is what happened in this century. They might have like a full history that they can dive deeper into later. But I love the atmosphere of this game. It feels unlike any other game I've ever played.
And that's another... well, one thing, sort of the comparison that immediately came to mind when we started talking about that, it sort of feels like those 4D arcade booths you would get into where you're feeling like the wind, and then all of a sudden enemy pops out, you're shooting them. It's about as close as you can get that, because the DualSense, obviously, you know, you're bringing in the rain and you're bringing in other senses, and then all of a sudden, you know, a few enemies pop in and you're like turning and shooting them. It has arcade influences even outside of the, you know, prior Housemarque IPs, that it's sort of bringing in that same feel. And hard to talk about some of the enemy variety, but because I want to get into that into spoilery talk as well. Okay, I will say not something I thought to write down, but a total brilliant point on your part. This is the best integration so far we've seen of the DualSense, without a doubt. I would not want to play this game on PS4, and I mean I would, but it would certainly be a little lesser experience. Yeah, and I mean imagine there were moments in this game I was surprised at how technically proficient this game was, because at moments, depending on the amount of enemies on screen, amount of projectiles on screen, there can be a lot happening. For sure. Like a lot. And I was surprised. I had a couple slight moments of chug, but those were very, almost indiscernible. Like the fact that there were so many enemies on screen, so many projectiles on screen, and it still just ran like a machine was so impressive. Yeah, and I don't even know if I had like gameplay chug. I just had other glitches, you know, that we could talk about. The bugginess is one of the detractors of this game, but it's not even that much, because it's not taking away from the gameplay so much as it is just the, I don't know, the convenience of the game in a weird way. But plenty more to talk about. Yes. Especially if we want to get into spoilers. The last thing I have, I'm going to hold my hand here, is to talk about the story. So,
From now on, if you have not played Returnal, if you've not finished Returnal, if you've not super finished Returnal,
that's a good point.
Avoid talking now. So to be clear, I'm working on the sort of bonus ending, I guess you could call it, of this game. And it's kind of random whether you can get those pieces or not. I've not gotten all the pieces to trigger that ending yet. I went ahead and watched it in the sake of this conversation because I thought this might be the last time we really have a chance to talk about it. So I will unlock that before anyone gets mad at me. But I've seen the sort of bonus ending. So if you have not yet, now is time to go. We love you. Thank you for listening.
Unless you just really don't care.
That's true. It's Spoilercast time. All right.
Now.
Yes.
All right. You come at me because I've been in this game a lot longer. So what are you thinking?
So, I should have said this game took me 30 hours to beat.
Yes,
to finish. Now, granted, I know you said it took you 20 hours?
20, yeah.
Not a surprise. You're better at shooters than I am, especially in console. Also, it's a good rule of thumb to add 2 or 3 hours when streaming.
Sure.
Or like 10, 20%, whatever, because you're slowing down to talk to chat and you're processing all differently. But 30 hours, I'm fine with that. Overall, I think that's a fine mark to beat it at.
No, I think I was seeing like people that like were, I don't know what average is of how good these people, but like late 20s hours is sort of what I was seeing.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, complete spoilers out the window. What the fuck is going on in this story?
So, it's not entirely obvious.
Right. I have my theory.
So let's break down both endings.
Okay.
And sort of dissect that.
Sure. So, throughout the game, you start in like a forest area, and you beat the first boss, the first biome, the boss of which is Frike. Then you go to the second biome, which is sort of this deserty kind of biome.
Yeah, it looks like Mars.
Yes. You beat that boss whose name is
Ixiom.
Good job.
I think I remember them all.
And then you go to the third biome, which... What does the third biome look like?
The Derelict Citadel. It's sort of like their ruined capital city, area. Like something to that effect.
Yeah, so it's kind of like a lot of architecture, a lot of like pillars that have broken down, sort of a post-apocalyptic looking thing. Then you fight that boss.
Nemesis.
Which is the hardest boss in my opinion.
It's without a doubt the craziest.
It's wild. It's super chaotic. Very cinematic. Awesome boss fight. And then a moment in the game happens that is pretty pivotal.
For sure.
So you beat this third boss. You get sort of... The whole game you've been chasing something called the White Shadow.
Yeah, which is like a distress signal or something.
Yeah, something pushing you further into exploring this area, or exploring this planet, rather. And you beat this boss, and I think you sit down, right? Doesn't Celine just like take a seat?
Yeah, and she like gets the message. It's like distress signal acquired, Astra extraction, like on the way.
Stay in place.
Yeah,
and then it shows this hallway that you entered to beat this boss, and there's a white light coming out of it. You're like, oh, that's the White Shadow. I don't think that is the White Shadow, but that's a false reveal. So you get rescued, quote unquote. You're on from what the game gives you, and I have not read anything else outside of what I've interpreted.
Yeah,
I want my interpretation to be my own.
Everything that I've read just seems to be interpretations. There does not seem to be a concrete.
Oh yeah.
You know,
but you have this distress signal, or this savior signal, and then you come back to this planet after being on Earth for 63 years and 8 days.
Yeah. And you die. It seems to imply that you die on Earth. Celine has lived to be a ripe old age.
Yes.
Dies, wakes up back on Atropos.
Which 63 years and 8 days is 836 backwards.
Yes.
Which we'll get into as well. So then I think right after that, you are shown a scene in the house. So I guess we should talk about the house. So throughout the game, you come across what I think they describe as a 20th century house.
That's exactly what they say.
In a random room, there will just be a teleporter in this house, and you can go into it, I believe, 6 times,
something like that.
And the only times you can go into it are when the lights are on, which is a cool little like.
Because when they're not on, it's like overgrown with like grass and moss and sort of things.
You can't.
When
enter.
the lights are on, it just looks clean.
It looks like a Kansas house. It looks like Superman's house in Man of Steel.
Exactly.
That's exactly the kind of house it looks like. And in this particular, a lot of the house scenes are sort of, I would say PT inspired.
It's certainly the most like horror or psychological horror elements of the whole game.
You're walking through this house. It's creepy. You pick up random things. There's a book you can read, which I'm sure has more to do with the story than I've realized. I've not gone back and read what the book says, but each of those they're almost like mini cutscenes or mini story snippets. Yeah. Those just end by coming out of the house. Usually you'll get something for your run. You move on. This scene is maybe the most pivotal scene for me in my theory of what this game is in the entire game, which is you see a kid in this house playing Returnal on a PS5.
Yeah, or like you're looking up and on the TV is Celine standing outside of the house, just standing there.
Yes.
And you're holding a DualSense and you see a PlayStation 5, yeah.
And so this little kid walks around the house basically saying like, where's my mom, that kind of stuff, and then alluding to sort of a monster, or just like I gotta hide, or I may be confusing a couple of them, I may be fusing them a little bit, but basically this kid's kind of scared of something. You're picking up a stuffed octopus at one point.
Octo.
Yeah, there's like a little astronaut figurine, which is important to the runs. There's all this stuff going on. I forget how that one ends.
Well, you go into the kitchen.
You have cereal with an astronaut.
You tell him the story.
Right, that you can pick the dialogue options.
You don't really know.
Yeah.
And then you leave out of there, and I think you go back upstairs. And that's the one where like you go back to the bedroom, you find Octo or whatever, and then you turn and the astronaut's there, and then the tentacles come out of its face.
Right. Okay. Yes. So then you get another cutscene with the kid later in the game, where you're kind of, I forget exactly, the kid's looking for Octo. That's what it is. They're like, Octo, where are you, Octo? We need to hide. And so you eventually find Octo in the dining room, wherever, and you get inside the television.
In the TV, yeah.
And then the astronaut shows up and like extends into the television. This is all, I think, important. So then the ending of the game, you when you come back from the 63 years, I'm doing air quotes for the video version. When you come back from the 63 years, you go through what I would describe as basically palette swapped versions of the biomes again.
Yes, exactly.
So like the third biome,
at least the first two.
Yeah, the fourth biome is the first biome, just looks a little bit different.
It's daytime or like something.
It's a little more overgrown.
Yeah, it's called the Overgrown Ruins. The second time, I forget what it's called the first time.
And then the fifth biome, which is the second biome again, instead of being a desert, it's now frozen over.
Yeah.
Maybe hell has frozen over. And then the sixth biome is underwater as opposed to sort of this
Abyssal Scar.
Yeah.
Great name.
It is a really cool. Yeah, all the area names are really cool.
Yeah.
And then you fight bosses throughout this. The fourth boss is what I consider
Hyperion.
One of the coolest boss designs I've ever seen, which is a boss at an organ that is made of like plant, like fauna or flora.
Flora, yeah.
And playing a sort of revamped version of the lick from Don't Fear the Reaper.
Yeah.
Earlier in an audio log, Celine finds one of the audio logs of other Celine quoting Don't Fear the Reaper.
It's one of my favorite moments in the whole game.
It's very cool. Well, when she's like, all our time has come here, but now we're gone, I'm like, that's a lyric.
Yeah.
You can see me, I was like, I know that's a lyric to something.
Yeah, like coming back, the 63 years later, and I was like, oh my God. Part of me thought I'd beaten the game, but then no, you're back. And then you pick up that audio log, and like the last line of whatever audio log that I picked up, and she's just like, seasons don't fear the Reaper. And and that's all she said. I was just like, I thought, I guess you could say it was sort of foreshadowing a boss fight that was Reaper-esque.
Yeah.
I think more that's talking about the last boss if you had to pick.
Yeah.
But just the forebodingness of that message was so cool. I loved it.
It was very, very good. And then you get to the boss. The whole time in the third biome, or the fourth biome, sorry, you're chasing this music. It's getting louder and louder as you go up. And then you get to the boss, and it's this creature playing this organ, playing a riff from Don't Fear the Reaper. All of its attacks are out of its back while this boss is playing its own boss music. It's so fucking cool. I love this boss fight so much. Granted, it does come away from the organ every now and then and attack you, but what an amazing boss fight. And then you go to What is the boss of the fifth? Oh, the fifth biome doesn't have a boss. That's right.
That's what I said. The boss was the Hadal keys you collected along the way.
Right. So fifth biome is structured in, there are sort of 3 branching paths. You have to finish each of them to open the door to go to the sixth biome.
In one run.
Which is maybe the hardest thing in the entire game.
I think it is.
Specifically that gauntlet area. That gauntlet area is incredibly tough. So then you finish that. You go to the sixth boss. You go underwater, which is going to play a big part in the story of this game.
Which, did you ever notice that there's no checkpoint of any kind? You every single time you have to run through the entirety of the sixth biome, like to get to the boss.
That's a good point. Well, is it not a shortcut to be able to shoot the orbs? Is that, would you consider that a shortcut? Because you have to go fight that mini boss.
I guess that's kind of true.
But you're right. You do have to go through the entirety of the sixth one again, as opposed to, a lot of times it would be like a Souls game where there's a gateway you could open, basically.
Yeah.
Like the bridge in the third biome, that kind of stuff. There wasn't one of those.
No. You didn't have to collect that one key again. So I guess there is a little bit. But
yeah, but not a lot. Yeah. It's a lot harder of
That's
an area.
certainly the longest biome you ever had to go through in one run.
Agreed. And then you fight the final boss.
Ophion.
Good job remembering all these.
Yeah, thank you. There are only 5.
But I didn't remember. The only one I remembered was Nemesis. That was and Frike, which is the first one. But this guy is very interesting. Do you want to describe him?
So picture like a giant tentacle monster, like huge, like mucosal tentacles.
Mucosal?
Coming out of
like covered in mucus?
I think so.
That's a cool word.
Coming out of like a hole underwater, but then its face is a giant skull, basically.
Yeah, it's like, it's almost Lovecraftian.
It is very Lovecraftian.
In its design. And then you have to shoot these eyes that appear in order to be able to damage it. You do that fight. After that fight, you see a car.
Yeah. Which is the impetus of the secret ending.
Right. But then you uncover the ending of the game, which is...
So we're talking about the first ending right now.
Yeah. Again, if you haven't left yet, you probably don't care about spoilers, so I'm just going to keep going. You enter on sort of a woody area, very similar to the first woody area you see when your ship crashes. You see a child in the back seat of a car holding a stuffed octopus, wearing the watch that you see the kid wearing in those cutscenes. It's obviously the same kid. And the first line of dialogue is, "Do you see the white shadow?"
Do you see the white shadow?
And it pans to, or it kind of pulls out to a woman driving a car. Now, there is some debate on whether this is Celine or not.
She looks strikingly like Celine.
I choose to believe this is Celine.
Okay.
I watched the ending on stream. Some people were like, "Oh no, that's Celine's mom. The kid's Celine, whatever." I was like, "That looks like Celine to me." And they were like, "Well, it's her mom. She should." And I was like, well, "Okay." I've watched it back again. I think it's Celine.
Okay.
It's up to interpretation because even the closed captions are very smart about this. They say child and mom. That's all they say. They don't say, kid and Celine, whatever. Yeah. So she's driving along. It shows the radio. The time is 8:36. 8:36 has appeared in multiple cutscenes. A lot of the house scenes, 8:36 has been a big thing. It's like the time on the microwave.
If you microwave your dinner for 8 minutes and 36 seconds, everything's going to be just fine. just fine.
It's good. Some like news press conference thing happens at 8:36. 8:36 has been a big thing. And she's tuning the radio, and Don't Fear the Reaper comes on. They're driving throughout this, this wooded area. They come to a bridge. They see the sort of, I don't know what, this will be up to interpretation.
Sure.
They see an astronaut in full astronaut gear, which has been sort of the monster of the house scenes. The woman driving the car swerves to miss the astronaut, drives off a bridge, lands in the water. Underwater, she is knocked out. A red light flashes on her face. It shows like this
giant tentacle monster
thing with 3 red eyes, which you have seen alluded to in the game before if you like rest in the plane or rest in the ship. That red light wakes her up. She unbuckles. She reaches for the kid to try to unbuckle her, and something pulls her out, not being able to reach her kid. And I think that's where the first cutscene ends.
And then you wake back up on Atropos. Or the credits roll.
As it's pulling her out, it shows the view of the moon from underneath the water.
Oh yeah, as if she's about to resurface,
right?
And then she gets pulled back down.
Yes. So that's how the first ending goes. Do you want to describe the bonus ending?
So the bonus ending, which did you see the house sequence that led up to the bonus ending?
I don't know that I did.
I don't remember all the details, and it's not as in-depth as the other ones, but the basis of it is that you go through and you finally get to go down the stairs into that area that's sort of been walled off.
Yeah, I didn't see
But as soon as you're like about to get there, you wake back up as Celine outside the house, but you look at your hand and you have car keys.
Okay.
So then you go through the whole game again. You beat Ophion again, which you have to do to re-access the ending.
Yeah.
And the car that you see the first time at the bottom of the ocean, which is kind of odd, obviously.
Yeah.
This time you have the keys and you can go up to the car and you can open the door.
Right.
And when you go to open the door, it sort of cuts. And you are Celine and you are walking up to a very creepy looking, I don't even know how to describe, like sort of desiccated, pregnant creature
in a wheelchair.
Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like a woman, but if they did like a Scooby-Doo makeup to make her scary, like it's basically a woman, but it's just a skull and sort of the last remnants of her flesh,
except very clearly pregnant,
with a pregnant belly and tentacles for appendages.
Yeah.
And hair,
with the subtitles labeling her as
Thea
or Taya, or however you want to pronounce it, which is Celine's mom. You come to find out.
Yes.
So this is Celine's mom, and she reaches up and she like grabs you by the neck or whatever, and she's just like, Celine, like whatever. And Celine is able to like push her off and sort of say like, get off of me. I don't remember exactly the lines of dialogue, which are not super important.
Right. She's like, I've told you to leave me alone or something like that.
And then it cuts, and all of a sudden you're sort of Celine again, and you're sort of looking around, and then you look down and you see your hands, and it's puffy whites, and you realize you're in the astronaut outfit.
Right, you're finally in the astronaut outfit.
And your visor turns, and you look over, and you see the car coming at you, which then swerves off the road.
Right.
Implying that Celine was in the astronaut outfit, in this ending at least.
Right.
Which is up for, which can be interpreted in different ways.
Yes.
Which is pretty much it. That's pretty much the end of the second ending, except that when the credits cut, it actually plays Don't Fear the Reaper full on, which I loved.
Oh, that's cool. I didn't know that. But the only other thing from the last bonus ending, and I just know this because I just watched it, you still see the crash happen.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
And then at the you see someone swimming up to the water as opposed to just the shot of the moon. The shot of the moon's still there, but then you see someone swimming up to the surface, and you hear like
she breaches.
like that kind of breathing, and then goes, Helios.
Helios.
Which is the name of the ship. Maybe also the name of the kid.
Maybe.
Which is my sort of theory.
Okay.
So, what is your theory on the ending in this game?
I can't really nail down exactly what I think is going on. The only thing you can say, I think, with 100% certainty is that the events on Atropos do not actually happen. Like, mainly because I think the most concrete thing is, you really think this giant plant-like alien is playing Don't Fear the Reaper on an organ?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
So we're left to conclude that what Celine interprets as her experiences on Atropos are sort of her coming to grips with the events of this car accident.
Yes.
The abyssal scar very clearly being the underwater, like, last scene being her version of going underwater in the car, like, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Then I still cannot decide whether I think Celine was driving the car or not. What do you think?
Okay, so here's my thought. I've gone full, I'm going to get as like nebulous as I can here. So here's my theory. I think Celine was driving the car. She has a kid named Helios. I'm not sure if the kid survives the crash or not. I almost think the kid survives. My overall theory is that obviously what we play in Returnal is the result of several traumas of Celine.
Yeah.
There are obviously some with her mother and some with her kid. I think that when she swerved off the road, the astronaut was never actually there. I think the astronaut, because we know from other audio logs, from the house scenes, that her mom was an actual astronaut.
Yeah.
I think her vision of the astronaut is the sort of expectations laid upon her by her mom.
I think that's a good sort of summation of best case theory.
Right.
Is that, yes, the astronaut is sort of her vilified image of her mom.
Yes.
And sort of, yeah, she sort of sees this everywhere. Like, she has her expectations that her mom had put upon her.
Yeah.
I think the only reasonable, explanation for why she would go through the grief of the story is that the child was probably killed in the car accident. But I don't know. It's just so weird for her to like breach and say Helios, and like, would she really name her kid Helios? I don't know. It's this.
But they're all named, like, her mom's name is Tia.
Everything in every name, I don't know if you looked at this, is a Greek.
It's all Greek, yeah.
Yeah. And they all have pretty specific meanings that correlate to the versions of the characters, even the bosses.
So my thought, and maybe this is me being too stubborn and sticking to an earlier theory I had. So the moment when you play as the kid and you realize you're playing a PlayStation and you're playing Returnal,
yeah.
My interpretation of that was that the kid, his mom, Celine, or their mom, I don't know.
I was going to say, I don't think it's ever defined.
It's ambiguous, right?
I always assumed it was a girl.
Yeah, because it does have but kids' voices are so hard to tell anyway.
Sure.
So the kid, we'll just say the kid, they are playing the PlayStation. My idea is that Celine, in an effort to live up to the expectations of her mom of being an astronaut, there's an audio log that says something like, "I knew it was a one-way mission."
Yeah.
Right, which means she's not coming back. My idea of what we see in Returnal is the kid imagining that Celine has gone to this expedition and has died in some way, and this kid is creating this narrative in their head of, my mom couldn't have died, so she must be stuck on this planet with this time loop, and here's pulling all in the trauma. Now, with the added parts of the ending, is it more likely that Celine lived and the kid died? Probably. But even then, it does something in my last note of like things I think should be celebrated about this game, that I think what really sets apart great horror from okay horror to me is when the horror is actually a metaphor for something else, right? It Follows is one of my favorite horror movies ever because it's a metaphor for STDs, and like The Babadook is a metaphor for mental health, like all that kind of stuff. This is obviously a metaphor for trauma. And I think that's what set this game apart. However you interpret the endings, I think, like you said, there are some agree upon-able things. One being the stuff on Atropos probably didn't actually happen, or Tropos, however you say it. And most of the enemy types and environmental stuff that we see are from one trauma or another.
Yeah, and a lot of people I've seen talk about the fact that so many, obviously not all, of the enemies that you find on Atropos are tentacled, like abominations, are just like twisted versions of Octo, being
True.
like an interesting like interpretation of like Octo as like a character.
Well, they even reference throughout the game like this sort of evil squid.
Yeah,
it's one of the games, or it's one of the things that you can reference in the story you tell the astronaut. There's some audio log or the book or one of those things reference like a huge squid as well. So,
yeah, and I want to read more about the Severed, which are the sort of demonic enemies that are like humanoid but have horns. Like, you find a lot of them in the second and third biomes.
The ones that look like Doom enemies.
Yeah, pretty much. I need to read more about, like, because there are a lot of the logs and sort of things you can find in the game talk specifically about the Severed, like as a species. One little point that I want to talk about, is just how Celine looks compared to how the driver of the car looks. Okay. So Celine, if you look at like the cover art of the game, is heterochromatic in her eye color. She has two different color eyes, and she's blonde. Yeah. But every other feature, she is featured the exact same as the driver, which leads me to think that the driver is probably more likely than not Celine. Okay. And this is sort of her sort of overly dramatized image of herself on this planet as an astronaut in the future, living up to like her mom's sort of image. Right. You know, because like the odds that if the kid is Celine and the driver is the mom, then the odds of her growing up to look exactly features other than the hair color and eye color exactly like the mom are just not really realistic. So that leads me to think that the version of Celine that we see inside the spacesuit is not exactly how Celine actually looks.
Right.
She sort of made herself look more interesting in like certain ways in the way that she's sort of interpreting these events.
Yeah.
Which I think is just another little wrinkle that I think is interesting.
No, it's cool. I wonder if that is a result of certain trauma as well. I wonder if in the world that we're both living in, where Atropos is imagined.
Yeah.
I wonder if this is Celine imagining herself different enough from her mother to be like, oh, well, I wasn't like Mom. I had blonde hair, and I had, you know what I mean? So I know some people are probably going to take a more direct approach to this and say like, oh, there are different timelines, and you know, she is both the astronaut and the driver, whatever. I love it more as like, this never fucking happened. And
yeah, I would love to. There's no evidence to me in the game that would indicate that anything actually did happen, because there's no sort. A lot of the times, like early on in the game, I was assuming that we would get to some sort of like heretical god on this planet that has trapped, you know, survivors of crashes in a time loop or something like that.
Like a Dormammu situation.
But then once you realize that you don't ever find that, and then you have to ask yourself the questions of, why is this boss playing Don't Fear the Reaper? Why am I finding a house?
Why is there a car?
Why is there a car? Like all these things that are just sort of so out of place that it almost must be imagined.
Yes.
So,
and I think there are a lot of really cool, I mean, kudos to Housemarque for, first of all, to my knowledge, having never done a story game, at least to this scale.
Yeah.
And having so many self-references throughout the game with the 836, with Don't Fear the Reaper, even with, assuming this is imagined, a lot of, or what we play, the gameplay is imagined. Like, when have you ever seen a spacesuit just say someone's name on the helmet? And all the helmets just say Celine. So it's like little shit like that when you're imagining yourself as some space combat person or a kid imagining it, whatever. You would think like, oh yeah, their helmet would say Celine, but it wouldn't. It would say, you know, whatever country they're from or whatever program, whatever. Like, just little details like that are so fucking clever.
Yeah, and just maybe that's sort of her constantly reliving the reality, like, I should have died. My kid died, I wish it was me.
That's a great point.
You know, over and over again, like, I'm experiencing my own death, and I wish that was the truth, but I'm forced to relive that because that's not what actually happened, you know. Something to that effect.
Yeah, no, I like it.
That's, if I had to put my money on a theory, and obviously I don't think Housemarque's ever going to come out and confirm a theory.
Right.
It's probably that Celine is the driver.
Yes.
The car crash happens because she sort of had a brief, fleeting hallucination of her mom as an astronaut in the middle of the road. She drives off.
Right.
Kid dies. I think maybe it could be interpreted that she was rescued, but the kid was not, and that she was pulled out of the car by like the tentacles.
The tentacles, which is just like somebody saving her.
And you know, she is, you know, breached, and she says Helios, which might be the name of the kid.
Yeah. And
you know, she's regretting. She's like, "Why me, not her?"
Right.
I think that's my best estimation.
I would agree with you that I think that is the clearest thing we could get from it. Yeah. And I understand that like my kid theory might not hold water as much anymore, having seen the endings. But there was another element that I thought of that I'm trying to remember now. It's just such an interesting ending that the fact that they tie in so much of what seems like a 30-second thing, like every detail. Oh, what I was going to say is, what is the White Shadow? Oh,
so the two, I think, most reasonable, which it's weird that the kid says it.
Yes.
I don't really understand how it ties back to the kid. To me, the White Shadow is either the astronaut being seen in the road,
or the moon,
or the reflection of the moon at the top of the water.
I think it's the moon. I think that makes more sense. Because it does kind of look like a shadow when you're looking at it. I wonder if the kid saying it is in a similar vein to her seeing the astronaut, where it's just like a hallucination thing.
Yeah.
Where it's like, hey, Mom, do you see the White Shadow?
Because it's a very strange thing for a kid to say.
It is kind of creepy. I mean, it's very creepy.
Hey, Mom, do you speak to the devil?
Don't fear the Reaper. What a game. It's so good. I think this is one of the rare cases where the ending of the game makes me like the game even more.
I won't say that, because I do like, I like interpretation. I like when they leave it a little open.
Yeah.
I would like just a little more direction as to what is the truth. where it leaves it open, but they're like, we're telling you the ending, but we're leaving it open. This makes it more like there's 3 or 4 potential possibilities that are all equally likely in certain ways.
One possibility we've not touched on is Atropos just purgatory.
Sure.
Is she just stuck in a purgatorial loop and she died on the crash and she's having to live with all the traumas of having been responsible for the death or at least trauma of her kid? And also, I wonder if the mom thing, she's in a wheelchair.
Yeah.
Is there some sort of inference that like maybe she left her mom in like a nursing home, or when she went on this one-way flight or whatever, that she didn't take care of her mom? I wonder how that plays in.
I think the inference there is probably that her mom was a relatively successful astronaut who experienced some sort of injury and then was no longer able to be an astronaut and then sort of was resentful towards her daughter and took it out on her in certain ways, which sort of led to that, not entirely healthy relationship, which is probably what made Celine have this weird demonic image of astronauts like in her head.
That's a good point.
That would be my take on that front.
Yeah, see, I just saw the astronaut as the immense pressure of having a mom who was an astronaut.
Yeah.
That was my take, but that's a really interesting take too. I love this kind of shit. I think this is
it is great for this.
Yes.
For the purpose of discussion.
Right. I love movies that end like this, like the Inception ending, things like that. Like I love when endings are sort of open-ended, and games don't do that enough. And for a game that has such a interesting, mysterious, almost Lost-like story where there's like all these elements that are seemingly random, but as opposed to Lost where they were like, yeah, well, here's our ending. This was like, you know what? You make it the ending you want. And I love that.
Yeah. I do love it, and we've, sung the praises, but I will say at this point, if you use the Rotland Globber regularly, you're a psycho.
What? That gun's good.
No, it's not.
It's good. It's a good gun.
Every single gun that is one shot, not good.
No, dude. No,
That's
no.
my take.
Okay, yeah, we got to get in the gun breakdown. All right, so what is your ranking of guns?
All right. I think 1 is still the carbine.
Oh,
I think the carbine is still the most versatile.
Carbine's great.
2, I'm going. It's tough because I think the top 3 for me are locked in.
Okay.
And they're semi-interchangeable.
I assume they're carbine, hollow seeker, pylon.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Then I think 4 is just the pistol, when you can find like an upgraded version of the pistol. I think the 3-round burst, when you find the upgraded most version of that, is actually really useful.
It's pretty good.
And honestly, after that, it's kind of like whatever for me. The shotgun is next because I think there are good uses for the shotgun.
Oh, I'm very in disagreement with you.
But I think the Rockgland Lobber or Rockland Globber, whatever.
It's Rockgland Lobber.
I never used that. I never picked it up almost ever. The Dreadbound, I still don't understand
I don't know if I've used that gun.
I remember seeing you like find it, but I don't know if
I don't think I picked it up.
I still can't figure out what exactly the shtick of it is.
What is it?
It's got like 4 like diamonds as like the ammo.
Okay.
And it sort of just has like a little burst and then it reloads. And I'm like, I don't really understand what the use of this gun is.
I don't remember this gun.
What are some other ones?
The Pyro Shell Caster, which is a grenade launcher.
There's the one that's the grenade launcher and one that's more of like a rocket launcher.
Yes.
The thermogenic or
launcher.
something.
It's called the launcher.
I think the thermogenic launcher is the one I prefer. Whatever one is like the 3-round, like, I like that one better.
That's the launcher.
Okay. I like that one better.
So here are my rankings.
Okay.
1, Electro Pylon Driver. That gun's fucking awesome.
I think it's the best for the end game.
Yes. It's best for boss fights.
I disagree with that.
What's best for boss fights?
I still think the carbine or the Hollow Seeker is the best.
So I would go Pylon Driver 1, Hollow Seeker 2, Carbine 3. So we're not in disagreement on what the top 3 are. We just have them in different order. 4, what's the gun? I don't think this is number 4, but I have to bring it up.
Sure.
There's a gun that is like a one-shot that you charge.
Oh, the Coil Spine something.
Driver? No,
Shredder? Coil Spine Shredder.
Is that one more like an SMG? No, you're right. That's the one that's like the one shot.
I know that's that one.
Okay, so I don't know where that one ranks, but
I never really used that one either.
I would almost venture to go Lobber 4.
No.
The damage over time of the Lobber is so good because it like poisons the enemy. Spitmaw Blaster would be my last one. I do not like the shotgun. There's just so many enemies. I don't play that game I'm never close to an enemy, I guess. So
I guess in the in game or like later in the game when I was like a lot more like blasé with like I'm just running and gunning and getting close and I can pick up all the health that I find. I'm getting close to enemies. When you get close to an enemy with that gun, it shreds.
That's true. Yeah. I mean, the good thing about this game is that they all have their benefits. I would say,
except for the Dreadbound.
Yeah, I still haven't played with that one. The rocket launcher one, not the pyro shellcaster, the thermogenic, whatever.
Yeah.
That one is really good for boss fights because you can kind of zone out and just if you throw it toward the enemy, you're gonna hit him. I would say, okay, the three I said, I'm gonna go launcher, lob, or pistol, and then the rest I don't really care. Which I like the pistol. That's the thing, like most of the guns in the game I like, and I'm not opposed to.
Yeah. See, for me, I think the best one, if I was going into a boss fight, is the Hollow Seeker. Because there's less of a risk of me missing entirely because I'm shooting so many bullets.
Sure.
So I'm always feeling like I'm doing some sort of damage.
Fair.
Whereas like any of the one-shot guns, like if I'm not very precise, I feel like I'm not making any progress.
Sure.
Which I really didn't like.
Yeah.
For group settings, for playing the regular levels.
Yeah.
The Electro Pylon Driver is
my God.
untouchable.
It's like, so good.
The fact that you can just lay down like a pylon here and a pylon there and hit 3 enemies and it's doing damage over time to multiple enemies is just so good.
And the Pylon Driver is great for boss fights too.
It is really good still.
Once you hit it, it still just does damage and you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah.
All right. Favorite alt?
Ooh. I think my favorite ones are just the ones that it's just one really powerful shot.
Yeah. Just
because it's less to think about.
Yeah. I like the one that's the green sort of multi-bullets go into one enemy thing.
Sure.
Which it is a one-shot.
Is that the one that's like, it's horizontal and it arcs, or is it the vertical and it's just in a line?
Well, those are blue, I think.
Maybe.
Or maybe it is...
I think one of those is green.
But it's the vertical one's the green one. But like...
Yeah, you're right.
I'm thinking of the ones that are... You still basically just hit one target. Like the horizontal one, there's one that like... shoots projectiles that bounce around.
Yeah.
I'm not as big a fan of that.
I think that's the one that's the horizontal and it
horizontal barrage, I think is what it's called.
The red one is the one that's just the one straight shot, which I really like.
It's good, but it's easy to miss.
Yeah.
The electric one's pretty cool.
I like that one for small groups of enemies too.
Am I missing any? I feel like I'm forgetting some.
There are some that I still haven't quite figured out. That seems like they don't do anything.
Like which ones?
I don't know because I don't really... They don't do anything, so I'm just like, well, not going to use that.
Fair, yeah. Man, what a game.
Have you settled on a score?
I think it's not a 10, simply because it's too buggy. There are too many maybe patchable issues with the game, but like even post beating the game, this was like this week, I was in a pretty decent run in the snow area. And the game just hard crashed on me to the point where I had to like manually reset my PS5.
Ouch.
It was fine, but it's one of those things. It's like, if you could just fix that. I think it's a 9.5 for me.
Wow.
I really, really like this game. I think it's going to be hard to beat for Game of the Year. Granted, we'll see if God of War comes out, how much I like Horizon. You know, there's a lot of games that could possibly beat it, but from the story perspective, I was hovering around a 9. What'd you give it, like a 9.2?
9.1 is what I gave it.
Yeah, so I was hovering around that until the ending, and the question marks of the ending made me like it so much more that I'm like, all right, there's more I want to see with this game. I loved it. I think it's great.
Because it is still, like, anywhere in, like, the low 9s is where I would have it.
Yeah.
9.5 is, like,
it's really fucking high praise, good, dude.
I think it deserves that on gameplay merit alone, and then it's just... How else does the rest of the game make you feel?
Right.
So,
man. All right.
God bless Returnal.
Hell yeah.
Darn good game.
Surprising Game of the Year candidate.
Absolutely.
Came out of nowhere.
Well, Tanner, you're back now. Maybe you skipped forward
to see the wrap up.
The spoilers are over now.
That's true. There'll be timestamps, so you're possible.
So, Tanner, do you have a recommendation to give for this week?
My recommend is going to be Don't Starve, a game that I have sort of gotten back into. I want to get this damn trophy. And another slight recommend I have is just go look through your game library. There are a lot of games that you probably own that you may haven't. I find myself, and I've had this discussion with people in the community as well. It's often that I'll see my game library and be sort of overwhelmed, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Paralysis by analysis is what they call it. But just take a look through it and go, what sounds fun? And just download it. Give yourself a chance to get through your backlog. Because a lot of people have a huge backlog. I'm playing Don't Starve again. It's not really a backlog game, but it's great. So
yeah. Yeah, there's plenty of games sitting in my library that I would like to get to, but just either aren't grabbing me or have not had time.
Now's the time.
Whatever it may be.
We don't have a big release coming until...
That's true. I don't give a crap about Ratchet. So.
I do, but...
My recommend, and this is just mainly a product of me watching pretty much nothing but YouTube in like recently. Like, there's no sports, so like if I'm sitting at home and I'm not playing a game and I'm not listening to a podcast, I'm just throwing YouTube on and seeing what pops up.
Yeah.
One thing that popped up that I'd actually watched before, but is a great like insight into game development and insight into one of the best games ever made, is the documentary Raising Kratos. Which, have you ever watched it?
I've not.
So it's the documentary about the making of God of War.
Yeah.
Heavily featuring Cory Barlog, who is the director of God of War. And it's just wonderful. Like, they're great characters at Sony Santa Monica. They give you a lot of great insights into the development of the game, and sort of, honestly, they give you some insights into what, not necessarily what God of War Ragnarok may be, but sort of how they were already percolating the ideas of what would become God of War Ragnarok in the makings of the first one.
Which is awesome.
If you like documentaries, it's about as good of a video game oriented documentary, and it's free. It's on YouTube, so it's on I think it's on PlayStation's just YouTube channel.
Cool.
So you can just go look it up.
I may have to watch that.
Absolutely.
That sounds really good.
It's great. So play Returnal.
Yeah. Shout out to the video of Cory Barlog reading the reviews of God of War.
Yeah, and getting teared up.
It's a great video.
Maybe we should just recommend God of War. Play God of War.
We're recommending Cory Barlog.
Yeah, he's a good human.
He seems great.
And we seem great, and you seem great.
Humble as ever.
And we seem great, even though we're taking next week off.
That's true. Yep, no podcast next week.
It'll be great the week after that, because it's E3.
Hell yeah, it is.
So we will iron out exactly what we're going to do for individual conferences here in the coming weeks.
We may stream it.
And we will relay those plans to you. But nevertheless, big times ahead. Big announcements ahead. E3 season has effectively already begun.
Yeah, I think it started this week.
So I think for the next few weeks, we're just going to be bombarded with announcements. Get excited. And until we see you again, we're tapping out.